Diakonia World Federation. For several years, we were fortunate enough to serve together in that role and got to travel many fabulous places around the world and have lots of fun together. Marianne just represented Diakonia World Federation at the World Council of Churches Assembly, and she's an ordained pastor in the Church of Norway. And she's done congregational work. She's been an administrator. She's taught at Theological College in Norway and in Botswana. And for those of you from the United States, Marianne has also served in Iowa. Like, that always cracked me up, that here's this Norwegian pastor who's serving in Iowa. I don't know why it's so funny. Marianne is a super fun person. She turns 70 on Sunday and she always has great shoes on. So Marianne, I don't know if you're wearing great shoes right now, but it'd be awesome to show them to us if you are. And send it over to Marianne, who is about to show us her shoes, especially her purple ones. Those are my favorites. Oh, I like those. Marianne, take it away.
Thank you, Lisa. It's nice to see you. Thank you for all the great talks we have had. And I love that you like my shoes. These are a little bit, good to walk in. When you turn 70, you can't use so high heels anymore. So, but they would be good to walk in, like we walked on the road towards Kilimanjaro, the two of us. That was a great experience. And thank you for inviting me to take part in this, did you call it, your seminars, or you're on the document or transformation. I'm really impressed with the work you are doing, and that you are so many engaging in this to discuss Diakonia and to discuss this certain document. I've been listening to the presentation of Matthew Ross, and I'm very sure I met him in Karlsruhe at the General Assembly, and I'm very sure that he is grateful and thankful that you are doing this work. I mean, so much energy that he has put into it. He said for the last 4 years, it has been a main part of his work, and that you have a big group like you really sitting down and working with the document. I think that also impresses him a lot. And as I understood, he is planning to come to your conference next year. So I hope that will materialize, because I think that will be great for him to meet you and to be able to continue that conversation as you have started. I've got 3 sentences to reflect on, and I'm going to try to do that. The first one is, what does the report mean to you? And with report, you mean the document, isn't it, Ted? Yeah. So, and the report as such, I don't know if it means a lot to me, but I think it is important that thoughts you have about Diakonia and actions around Diakonia is put into words. That is not just some people thinking and some people acting, but that is written down. So it's possible to discuss it. And like I said, I heard what Matthew Ross was saying, and I also heard him say about the same in Karlsruhe, that they have put a lot of efforts to get this document out. I also know Kjell Nordstokke, who has done the work on the first part of the report. I know him pretty well. He lives in Norway. But I have some buts, and I'm going to take them up while I'm talking, because there are something to this document that I'm kind of wondering about. Sometimes it might be the English language that I don't get everything very clearly, because it's not the easiest English language in the report. But I'm a Lutheran. I don't know if you are all Lutherans here. No, but I'm a Lutheran. So that's good. And for me, Diakonia is loving your neighbor. It's the caring ministry of the church, and it's loving your neighbor. It's inclusive communities. It's caring for creation, and it's struggling for justice. It's those sentences put together, and they start in the congregation. They start with you and me. And it says in the document someplace that it is, ecumenical diaconia is about the same as the normal diaconia. But I'm just wondering if using the word ecumenical diaconia, if it throws us off in a way. That's a question. Maybe I can have some questions that you can discuss when you go into your breakout rooms, if you like. If you don't like, don't do it. On page 52 in the report, there is a quote from His Holiness Aram Keshishian, and I assume he must be Orthodox of the name. And he says, Diakonia belongs to the very nature of the church. Being in communion with Christ is loving one's neighbor, being with the sick and afflicted. These are not just the moral obligations of the church, but rather its constitutive elements. The church does not have a diaconia, it is diaconia, namely a continuous and committed discipleship to Christ for the rebuilding of world community and recreating the falling world according to the plan of God. Through diaconia, the church becomes one with Christ and at the same time brings Christ to the world. Diaconia is both the expression of the unity of the church and the implementation of the gospel message. Maybe it comes very clear this way also in the report. For me, it's not that very clear. It's like talking about on a quite different level. Because I think it starts in the local congregation with you and me. And diaconia is kind of a common diaconia. I don't know if that's the word you use, but it's the diaconia you do just by acting as a Christian. You don't have it, you do it, as this holiness was saying. And of course, we are not all deacons, but we can do like we all are common pastors. Is that an understandable word? We can all be a pastor, but of course some are educated to be it. It's a difference between that. You specialize, and the same with the deacon and the diaconia. You specialize to do diaconal work. That can be in the congregation, it can be in the institutions, can be in society, and it can be on an international level. So then I feel a lot of this ecumenical diaconia in this document is on this international level. But are we then creating something new and different? Because I think ecumenical diaconia can also be between you and me. Like we aren't all Lutherans. So I mean, we are ecumenical just by being here together, all of us. So that's my little question about the report as such. The next question is, what is the most important element of the document? In my work, as Lisa said, I have been working different places in the church. I've also done some teaching, but I've always been between academia and the practical life, academia and praxis, describing academia to be understood in praxis, because academia might use a different and not so understandable language. It's not always easy to follow the thoughts if you're just used to be a practical person. But when you are doing praxis, it's important to kind of relate to what you are doing, to reflect on it, and not only just continue doing it. And I've seen in different places I've been this importance to try to get academia down to a language that's understandable and workable for people out in the field. Like my last job, that was not specifically Diakonia, it was more Christian teaching all over. We did, for example, doctorates that we asked them to shorten them down to 48 pages to make a document that could be read out into the congregations. Because people out in the practical life, they don't have the time and the energy to sit down and read a thesis that is maybe 250 up to 500 pages. But it's possible to read it when it is in between there. And all this, that was my background for saying that I liked a lot in this report when they had the practical examples. It's good, the starting all the thoughts about what is Diakonia and all this, but when it comes down to the practical example, it's so much easier to understand what they are talking about. I like describing Diakonia in different churches, like the Orthodox, where Diakonia is the liturgy after the liturgy. And the Catholic Church, in the beginning there, it says, the Church's deepest nature is expressed in her threefold responsibility of proclaiming the word of God, which is martyria, celebrating the sacraments, liturgia, and exercising the ministry of charity, Diakonia. So all these three parts, martyria, liturgia, and Diakonia, they are there to form a church. That's the way the Roman Catholic are looking at it. And you see, if you look at the different churches, it's a lot that's the same, but you kind of get a broader view and understanding from my point of view, reading by different churches, how do they describe Diakonia for them. And at the same time, there is also a description about areas and regions and telling how you work in areas and regions. I also think that's helpful and understandable. And of course, the last part, the way forward, that you have some goals, some way to go. And then discussions and debates from the assembly. It was great to be at the assembly, as I said in the beginning. I was very grateful that I was able to go there on behalf of Diakonia. And of course, it was much more than discussing this document. This is a kind of a small part of it. So, but for me, it was kind of a big lump of what I was doing, though, because I took part in the ecumenical conversations on the Diakonia. But I would like to say that being together like this, it was 700 delegates and 500 like me, which delegated representatives. We were allowed to speak, but not to vote, because we didn't represent churches, but organizations connected to WCC. But then there were lots and lots of other people. They said around 4,000 every day, and lots of discussions going on, and you kind of had to find your way, to put it that way. But the greatest was all the worship, morning worship, evening worship. And I remember from the assemblies of Diakonia, that's also the very nice part, when we are together and celebrate worship together. That's really a good thing. And of course, when we do it as deaconal persons, as deacons and deaconesses and people working with Diakonia. And here it was much, much broader and lots of different churches. Catholic Church is not a member, but they had representatives there. But beside that, I think it was almost all the churches. Pentecostal churches, Lutheran, Methodists, other kind of Reformed, Orthodox Church, African instituted or other instituted local churches, 352 member churches in WCC. So that one, it was music like from Armenia, where they were just singing on one tone, different services every day, one tone, to the Jamaica reggae. You know, yeah. So that was a very good experience. Then to the ecumenical conversations. I started out in one that was on climate and especially on water, but I realized because they were parallel, I thought I could, take both, but I had to go to the Diakonia then. So I didn't take a big part in that first one, but I would say something more about it in a little bit, because it was a different way of reporting. At the Diakonia, the conversations, we were not a very big group, but a good group of people. But then they had lots of presentations. And you have seen that report because I think you got it from Matthew. At least I saw it in an email from Ted. You saw it was a lot from the presentations that was done. And I think that the idea was that we should, in this group, we should discuss it and come up with some, to challenge the new central committee, how they are going to work on this document in the future. But it wasn't really showing the discussions. It was more like what we got presented, which was very different from that other group I was in with climate and water, because there we were asked, and because I was enrolled, I also got that question. We were asked, what would we like to have in the report? And I could write in, opinions from us that we had discussed in the Justice Committee. What would we like to have in a document like that? So that's one of my wondering. The recommendations, are they really from this group, or is it kind of a drive to get a closer link between WCC and ACT? And ACT is just a small piece of what we are doing in Diakonia. And I think that's important to have in mind. It's very important, but it's not the whole broad picture of Diakonia. In Norway, where I live, and we have something called Norwegian Church Aid, which are owned by the churches, not Roman Catholic. That's the same all over. I don't know if that's in the US, but most of the world, it's the same. They have their own, they have Caritas. But Norwegian Church Aid, they are owned by the churches. And they are a member of ACT. And of course, they are acting on behalf of the churches in Norway to do diaconal work abroad. But the churches, they don't only do that, they do a lot of other diaconal work also. So my little fear, maybe I overdo it, but my little fear is that can this document kind of make concrete more that you think of Diakonia as just aid and not this loving your neighbor, inclusive communities. This is what's happening, the common Diakonia around you. Like from the discussion we had about the ecumenical conversations, they started in one of the sessions to talk about language. The language we used about, should we call it Diakonia or should we call it social service? And the problem that came up was that with the donors giving money to these aids, these members of ACTS, would they understand the theological language? And of course, I can see for them that might be a problem because they need the money, but I think this is a not very important from the common diaconal work. So I think that we need an affirmation on our diaconal daily life diaconia. That we in this document also see that to point out that it's not only between WCC and ACT Alliance. And I got in two words in this challenges, so affirmation, and that was and member churches. Because in number 1, I can see if I find it again. In affirmation number 1, it said that we strongly affirm that all the points listed in chapter 10 remain important for the work of the WCC and ACT Alliance. And then I managed to get in and member churches throughout this decade. So it's written there that it's not only the diaconia, ecumenical diaconia, is not only between WCC as a member organization and ACT Alliance as a member organization of the aid organizations of the churches. It's also what's happening out in the churches where you and I live our daily life. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. I've asked Sister Megan McClinton to say a word of thanks for your presentation, and thank you for being with us today. Much appreciated.
I'd like to thank you, Marianne, for your presentation today, and a few things that really just spoke to me from your presentation, specifically at the beginning when you talked about common diaconia as that it's, yes, that diaconia is loving our neighbor and that it is inclusive, caring for creation, but the common diaconia is, it's just acting as a Christian, and that that it starts in the congregation and it starts with you and I, and so I really appreciated that, because in a lot of this document, you know, does speak about the World Council of Churches, and then of course and the ACT Alliance, and how you brought it to the end of your presentation, how saying that that we are, you know, we are being affirmed in the diaconia, in our diaconia, because it's not just those two organizations, those two larger organizations, but that it's what's happening in our own congregations and in our daily lives and in all that we do, and it's how we live out our lives. So I really appreciated your presentation from that perspective. And you're lifting up at the assembly about your common worship together, and how important that was in the at the assembly, how that was brought, seemed to bring you all together. And so I thank you very much for your presentation today. Thank you.